Let's read a screenplay together. Today we're going to chat about a screenwriting related topic. Should we write emotion or internal feelings in the description of a screenplay? By discussing this topic, we are going to read some of the professional screenplay together so we can learn together. Today's question came up through a conversation that I had with Gareth here on YouTube. I hope I pronounced your name right. We basically had a conversation under the comment in one of my older videos about whether or not we should write emotion in the description in a screenplay. I believe in that video I mentioned about that try not to do that. That's because when I was in the film school, in my screenwriting class, that's what I was trained, focusing on writing what can be seen on screen and then figure out a way to convey emotion into action, into something we can see, instead of trying to write internal feelings or thoughts outwardly onto the page. I don't know if you ever heard of the same thing, or if you happen to be in the film school or went to film school, did your instructor teach you the same thing? The idea of not to write emotion in the description was explained like this. Ultimately, those screenplay that we have in hand, it's a screen direction. It's very difficult to communicate emotion between people. For example, if you say this person feel miserable or sad or joy, different people will interpret differently. You want it to be communicated as clear as possible, preferably only communicate things we can see on screen. That's one of the things that confused me for a long period of time, because spoiler alert, there are a lot of screenplay that I read, professional or award-winning screenplay that I read. They actually have some emotion description or feelings or thoughts in the action sequence in the description. There are certain screenplay that's really good job to avoid that, and then some screenplay is very direct, and then you kind of reading it as if you are reading a novel. Today we are going to read together from 3 different screenplay to really learn about how those award-winning screenplay really write the description, and then what kind of alternative we can do in order to make it communicate in a much more visual way instead of kind of like a fiction novel. So we are going to read from La La Land, The Place Beyond the Pine, and also from the Oscar-winning screenplay Manchester by the Sea. And then let's start from The Place Beyond the Pine first. This is one of the examples that have a ton of emotion and internal thoughts in the description, and then let's see how the writer does it. The Place Beyond the Pine is one of the blacklisted screenplay that finally made into movie with Ryan Gosling and Bradley Cooper. We are going to read a little bit towards the beginning of the screenplay just in case you haven't watched the movie. I'm not going to spoil the story for you. Basically, I'm only going to read the part that's about how Luke character is reacting to his baby son that he didn't know that was existed, but it's going to be the second time he meets this baby. Give you a concept. The character Kofi, he is the guy that's dating Luke character's ex-girlfriend, who is the son's mother, and he's basically helping Luke's ex-girlfriend taking care of this baby as well. This is a scene that they met outside of their house. Exterior, 2-family house, morning. Luke rings the doorbell. Bag of biscuit under his arm. Door opens. Romina stands there wearing her Sunday's best. She is speechless and stares at Luke through the screen door. Wow, look at you. You look like a princess. What are you still doing here? I'm here. He holds out the bag of biscuit. You like pancakes? I like to make people pancakes. I got special way with them. You wanna know my secret ingredients? Huh? Love. They are not the kind of pancake you get at that greasy place you work, you know? Romina nervously looked back into the house. And anyway, I'd like to make you and Jason some of my special pancakes. Would you allow me to do that? This isn't a good time. Ready? Romina turns, sees Kofi can come. 28, black, wearing a suit, come down the stairs carrying Jason in his arm. We are going to church. Coffee opens the door, step out onto the porch, faces Luke. I know who you are. Well, you got me at a disadvantage. Luke sees his son, Jason, dressed in a white baptismal gown. He is less frightened of his own son now. In fact, he wants to hold him. He gestured to Coffee. Do you mind? Coffee doesn't want Luke to take Jason away from him. It's okay. Let him. Coffee hesitates, concedes that he really has no choice in this matter. He hands Jason to Luke. Watch his neck. Luke and the baby stare at one another. Wow, he looks like a little prince. Romina watches Luke and Jason, smiles. Tears well in her eyes. Coffee sees it all happen. So this is a very extreme example that it's very clear there are a lot of things going on in the description of the screenplay that's not visible but internal. For example, it describes how Luke feels. He doesn't feel as frightened of his own son now, and then also it describes how Luke wants to hold his son, and it also describes how Coffee feel like he doesn't have any choice but only hand over the son to Luke. Things like that are not really something we can visibly see on screen. It's all depend on how actors going to interpret and act out, and it's very difficult to kind of convey the message. And even you see on the screen how Luke wants to hold his son, but we don't know he's less frightened than the first time he met his son. So the screenplay, The Place Beyond the Pie, has a lot of description like that with internal thoughts or feelings on the page. Honestly, when I read this screenplay itself, the writing was so beautiful. It felt like I'm reading a novel. But once again, these are things that we were told in film school that try not to do. So this is one of the examples. Now let's read the second example, Manchester by the Sea. So the Manchester by the Sea, it's Oscar-winning screenplay. So whatever it does, it's a screenplay that's recognized by mainstream media. So it's professional. I got nothing to say. I'm only going to read from early pages so I don't spoil the story. And one thing, if you watch the film, it's about a story of mourning. And the story starts from the leading character, Lee, find out the death of his brother, and that's the inciting incident. I'm going to directly heading over to the scene where he find out his brother's death, so we can find out how the writer described the reaction or feeling of Lee when he find out the death of his brother. Let's go to page 11. Interior Beverly Hospital day. We led/follow Lee as he walks quickly through the hall towards the ICU, easily navigating the twists and turns from habit. He goes into the ICU. Interior ICU nurses station, continuous day, and approaches George, around 50, a big weather-beaten guy, and a nurse Irene, 40s. They both react as Lee approaches. Hiya, Lee. Is he dead? George's eye filled with tears. He makes a helpless gesture. I'm sorry, Lee. He passed away about an hour ago. Oh, I'm so sorry. Lee looks at the floor, hands on his hips. Nurse Irene gives his arm an awkward squeeze. Lee stares into the middle distance for a moment. Did you see him? Yeah, no. I brought him in. We were looking at the boat this morning, and he just, I don't know. He just, fell over. I thought he was kidding me at first, then I called the ambulance, and that was it. Lee shake his head, still staring at the floor. I'll just call Dr. Muller and then tell him that you're here. So this scene, the description is very short, very simple, yet brilliant, because it only written descriptions that's visible. For example, Lee looks at the floor, hands on his hips. and Lee stared into middle distance for a moment. Also, nurse Irene gives his arm an awkward squeeze. Things like that. It's all action-based, but we can really sense the shock feeling that Lee experienced, and then we also sense somehow Lee is having a difficult time to register and then process, but also he's very calm at the same time, and the entire moment is very awkward. But in the entire description there was no mention of how Lee is having a difficult time to process and was shocked and taken aback by the news. And I thought that was very brilliant. Every scene is kind of like what the movie was presented on screen. So the last one we're going to read is from The La La Land. It's going to be a slightly longer scene, but I picked this scene because I thought there was a lot of internal emotion changing throughout the scene very quickly. So I want to share with you how Damien Chazelle described on the page in the description for that scene. I picked this one from kind of middle of the film. I don't think it's that much of a plot spoiler, so I think it should be okay if you haven't watched the movie. It's basically a scene where Mia went to her boyfriend Sebastian's concert. Mia watches Sebastian play on the stage, play something that he doesn't like. Mia is kind of taken aback by how Sebastian was okay play this kind of music that he hates, not the kind of music that he is passionate about. I'm going to read through this very long description, no dialogues, and to see how Damien Chazelle described the internal change that Mia had within the scene. Interior, the echo, night. Sebastian is on stage. He's the only musician we can see. The floor beyond the stage is filled with people. Amongst them, we spot Mia, beaming with pride. Sebastian sees her, smiles to her as he plays a piano intro. Mia grins right back, heart swelling. A second spotlight turns on, illuminating Keith. He sings. He has a beautiful voice. Mia bobs her head. It's just Keith and Sebastian right now. All acoustic, a simple, catchy tune. And then, suddenly, a drum machine surging, and boom, the entire club is lit up as the music explodes. A full-fledged dance beat and a thick radio-ready electronic track. Mia is taken aback, but she keeps bobbing her head as the crowd around her goes crazy. Keith owns the stage as Sebastian plays out more. Now switch to an electronic keyboard, complete with synth sound. We recognize fragments of melody from when Keith and Sebastian first rehearsed, but the tune has been transformed beyond recognition. Not a hint of jazz. Keith breaks into the chorus, and a trio of backup singers are revealed stage left. The band surges into the song's bridge. A backup dancer appears stage right, scantily clad, and then the lights go nuts. It's a full, loud night show now. Drafts of red, blue, green, and orange cutting through the dark. The crowd starts cheering, pumping their fists. Mia looks at Sebastian. He's not fighting any of this. He sees her, she smiles, but something is changing in her expression. She looks at the lights, the singers, the dancers, Sebastian and his bandmates in a matching magazine cover-ready outfits. She looks at the crowd around her, the hollers growing more and more frenzied as Sebastian launches into a prolonged solo. Mia looks back at him, takes it all in. Is this really him? As the mass of people swells and moves, Mia finds herself pushed to the side, bit by bit, away from the center. She tries to hold her ground, but is edged further and further away. Sebastian, deep in his solo, doesn't notice. Mia tugs against the tie of the crowd, but to not avail. She is pushed to the back of the club, away from the lights and into shadow. So it looks like in this description, there's kind of mixed way of writing out thoughts and emotion. There are parts Damien Chazelle directly write down how Mia thinks, how Mia feel. For example, when Mia first sees Sebastian playing, she grins right back, heart swelling. The feeling of a heart swelling is not necessarily something that's directly you can see on the screen. Once again, it depends on the actor's interpretation, how they act it out. And then there's even a thought process for Mia in the description. Mia looks back at him, take it all in. Is this really him? So thoughts like that in the description, there's no way we can really see that on screen. Even if the actor acts really well, interpret really clearly, and then plays on the screen, different audience is going to interpret very differently. Again, the writer leave this part in the screenplay. Looks like it's totally okay to write certain things in the description that you might not visibly can see. People's thoughts, people's feeling. But also in the description, there are places we can completely clearly sense how Mia feel, and then the writer didn't write how she feel, but write within action. For example, it says, Mia, look at the Sebastian. He's not fighting any of this. He sees her, she smiles, but something is changing in her expression. So this something is changing in her expression. It's really up to how actor is going to play out. But we really can sense the feeling of she is not really admiring this moment anymore, but she is questioning about what is going on around her. Another part, as the mass of people swells and moves, Mia finds herself pushed to the side, bit by bit away from the center. She tries to hold her ground, but is edged further and further away. This part is also more of utilized visual in the description to help us feel what Mia is feeling, and it's quite clear she didn't understand this crowd, and then she is being pushing away and further from her boyfriend Sebastian, and we can completely experience her feeling of being isolated. So through reading these 3 different screenplays, as well as other screenplays I read and the experience throughout the years, what I understand is it's okay to write emotions or thoughts in the description, but at the same time we want to be very careful not to overdo it. We can't really treat the screenplay like a novel to write a long paragraph of how the character feels, what the character thinks. But here and there, it's totally okay to have a little bit emotion add on to kind of make it clear for the reader, for the filmmakers who is going to make movie based off the screenplay, or for the actors to get a little bit idea of what is going on inside of the character's head. I think what you can do is whenever you can, try your best to see if there's a way to translate this emotion onto a screen with actions. And then that way, it will make the communication very clear. As the examples that I just read, the parts that we can grasp the feeling most accurately are actually the parts that described with certain action in a very smart way. For example, Mia pushing out of a crowd, things like that. I definitely think there's a benefit if you can make emotional thoughts very clear through action. But if you can't, it's okay to have some clarification there. Just don't overuse it. But once again, I'm not an instructor of screenwriting. I only speak based off things I read and my experience. What are your thoughts of it? Have you ever heard of people discussing about whether or not writing emotion or internal thoughts in the description? Or have you done that? Or what your solution is? Let's discuss this in the comment down below. And thank you so much for tuning in today's reading screenplay together. I don't know if you like this new format, but if you do, please let me know, and I would love to do this more because I love this kind of discussion. I love reading screenplays, so it would be nice if I can do this with you together more often. And if you enjoy this video, you might also like this one. I'm going to link right here. And thank you so much for watching. Be patient, be present, stay creative. I'll see you next week. Bye. Beep.